The sun was sinking low over the dusty plains when Clara Whitaker stood trembling at the edge of the church steps, her wedding dress heavy with dread rather than joy, each embroidered pearl feeling like a chain dragging her down into a life she had never chosen, a life forced upon her by a cruel rancher named Barrett Cole, a man whose wealth commanded obedience and whose fists commanded silence. She had tried to run before, tried to escape the cold iron in his eyes, but each attempt had been met with threats against her family, leaving her trapped like a bird with clipped wings. And on this day, the day the town gathered, whispering behind gloved hands, she felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. Her heart pounded as she looked toward the horizon, toward the distant line of land where freedom shimmered like a mirage, but no one dared help her, no one dared defy Barrett Cole, except one. Luke Marston, the quiet cowboy with a steady gaze and a heart no hardship had managed to break, had arrived in town just a few months earlier, taking odd jobs and keeping to himself, yet somehow he noticed everything, especially her fear, especially the way she kept looking toward the pasture gate as if waiting for a miracle, and on nights when the wind howled across the plains, Clara would sometimes hear a soft knock on the barn where she hid to cry, and Luke's voice whispering gently, "You deserve better." Still, she never imagined he would risk his life for her, and as the church doors creaked open and Barrett stepped forward in his polished boots with that cruel smirk carved across his face, she felt the last sliver of hope shrivel inside her, but the thunder of hooves shattered the silence. Every head snapped toward the trail, skirts swishing and hats whipped by the wind as a lone rider charged toward them, dust swirling around him like a storm. Luke Marston rode hard, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with a fire no one could mistake, and as he tore down the main street, the pastor froze mid-sentence, Barrett's face twisted into fury, and Clara's breath caught painfully in her chest, for in that moment she realized, he had come for her. Luke swung off his horse before it even fully stopped, boots slamming into the dirt, and he strode toward the church steps with the confidence of a man who had already made peace with whatever consequences would follow. He didn't bow his head, didn't apologize, didn't even look at Barrett. His eyes were locked only on Clara, as if she were the only soul in the world. "This wedding isn't happening," Luke declared, voice rough with anger and yet steady as steel, and a collective gasp rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Barrett stepped forward with a snarl, his hand drifting dangerously toward the handle of his pistol as he barked, "She's mine, boy." Bought and paid for. Clara flinched, but Luke didn't move, didn't blink, didn't break. Instead he looked at Barrett with the calm bravery of a man who had already counted the risks and still chosen the fight. "A woman ain't property," Luke said quietly, the words carrying across the dry air with surprising force, "and she sure as hell ain't yours." Before Barrett could speak, Luke turned to Clara, and his voice softened like warm rain on cracked earth. "Clara, you don't have to do this. If you want out, if you want a different life, I'll take you. I'll give you a future where you're free to breathe, free to choose, free to be loved the way you deserve. But only if you want it. Only if this is what your heart chooses." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as her chest tightened with a sudden, overwhelming rush of relief and fear and longing all tangled together, for she had dreamed of escaping, dreamed of running far from Barrett's cruelty, but she never truly believed she would be allowed to choose, never believed anyone would fight for her. And yet here stood a man willing to risk everything, his reputation, his safety, his very life, to give her that choice. For one long heartbeat, the world stood still, the wind pausing as if holding its breath as Clara stepped forward, her hands shaking, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Luke, yes." Shock rippled through the gathered crowd, and Barrett lunged forward with rage boiling in his eyes, but Luke was faster. He stepped between Barrett and Clara, one hand resting on the grip of his revolver, not drawing, just warning, his stance unmovable, his voice cutting the air like a blade. "You take one more step, Barrett, and this ends in the ground." Barrett halted, recognizing the steady, lethal resolve in Luke's stance, the kind of quiet deadliness found only in men who had survived too many battles to fear another. Finally, with a curse and a glare that promised revenge, he spat at the dirt and stormed off, fury echoing with every angry stride. Clara collapsed into Luke's arms, trembling, tears of relief soaking into his shirt as he held her with a gentleness that felt like coming home, and the townsfolk, those timid souls who had watched her suffering in silence, now stared in awe, murmuring blessings and words of support as Luke led her away from the church, away from the life she never wanted, toward the horse waiting at the edge of the dusty road. They rode away together, leaving behind the broken pieces of her past, the wind whipping her hair, Luke's arm steady around her waist, and for the first time since childhood, Clara felt the air taste like freedom. There would be challenges ahead, struggles, dangers, maybe even Barrett's revenge lurking in the shadows, but she knew, deep in her bones, that she had chosen the right man, a man who saw her worth, who fought for her, who believed in her, and that was enough to carry her into whatever tomorrow held. And as their silhouettes disappeared beyond the golden horizon, the story became a whispered legend in town, of the brave cowboy who stopped a wedding and gave a woman her life back, and the woman who found her courage because he offered her his hand, not as a rescuer but as an equal, proving love born of freedom is the strongest kind of all. Friends, if this story touched your heart, if you believe in courage, in hope, in second chances, then make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful tale like this. Your support helps these stories ride even farther across the world.